the girl I had met was from Atlanta, so on the north side here. So I got introduced to this area. I really fell in love with it. And it didn't work out with the girl, but I got introduced to the area and somehow ended up here. And I think I moved here in 96 or 95, something like that. So I got out of the forest products industry for a while, stumbled into the recruiting business in IT recruiting. I've had an IT recruiting company for 25 years. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I live in a town called Milton, which is kind of on the outskirts of Atlanta. A lot of, it's kind of a wealthier area that a lot of the professional athletes from Atlanta live up here. And so it's, kind of an affluent area that people spend a lot of money in, and they're willing to invest in, big houses, and which is a good segue into, live edge slabs and making nice tables and things like that. So anyway, I had a big tree in my yard that we took down, and the friend that sawed it down and milled it, he told me, he says, "You realize how much this thing is worth?" I didn't really know. It was a red oak, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It really wasn't worth as much as he says it was, but it certainly was big. It was at least 3 feet across. So got it milled out, and then it was like, oh no, now what do I do? Well, I got to get it kiln dried, and I started looking into kilns, and I had a couple options. There was a guy north of me who had a dehumidification kiln. It was basically a tractor trailer that he put a fan and a dehumidifier and a heater in there, and that's how he dried. And honestly, he was just really bad at it. And then there was a guy on the south side of Atlanta. There's if you look in the iDRY directory, there's down in Concord, Georgia. There's an iDRY customer down there, and the guy was very, very gracious to me. I brought 6 big slabs down to him, and I brought 6 big slabs up to North Georgia. Had them both dried about the same time. And when we got through the whole process, the dehumidification kiln, I might as well have just turned that stuff into firewood. It was just awful, cracked and warped and twisted. The stuff that went through the iDRY looked like the day it had gone in. It was just as flat as it can be, and it just came out absolutely beautiful. I was like, well, this is the way to go. And I'm always curious about businesses, so I was kind of asking this guy about his business and how he got into it and how it's doing. And he was so gracious to me to share his financials and stuff. So here's a guy living in the middle of nowhere in South Georgia, pulling in, and he had a little retail lumber business too, but keep in mind, he's in a really small town, middle of nowhere. And he said he was doing about $750 a year in sales, and he was making about 325 profit. And I was like, that is a lot of money for having one iDRY, and he had a wood whiz slab flattener, and he's got a little retail store that he sold specialty wood. And I was like, that's exactly what I would like to do, except I'm going to do it on the north side of Atlanta, where people are a lot bigger customer base. And so anyway, I at the time I was having a good year with recruiting, and I said, heck with it, I'm just going to go buy a standard. And I remember when I bought the standard, I had a conversation with Jim Parker, and it was probably 3 weeks after I took possession of it. And he goes, Ed, it's going to be no time before you're going to wish you would have bought the Plus. And I'll be darned if he wasn't right. It was probably 3 months later. I was like, geez, I should have got it. Maybe it was a little bit longer. It could have been 6 months, because it took me a little while to figure things out and, focus in on species and, where the value is and stuff. So I learned a lot over the first couple years just with that standard. And, what I hope to do today is just kind of help you guys avoid some of those pitfalls that I went through. And I'm going to give you some of the things that I think are really important to, getting off on the right foot if you're going to get into this drying business. So that's probably a little bit more history than I really wanted to get into, but it kind of sets the backdrop of where I am today. So I started with a standard, had it at one location for I think it was probably not quite a year, maybe 9 months, and then I ran into problems with material handling. The guy that I was dealing with, he lost his loader. Basically, he had a lease purchase or something and couldn't purchase it when it came to purchase it. So here I had an iDRY stuck out on a farm out in the middle of nowhere with no way to move slabs around, no way to get stuff sawed. I was like, okay, I'm out of here. So I, in that first place I set it up, I actually had it stuffed inside a shipping container, and it actually worked pretty well. But it wasn't like the right scenario. You know, we were loading it on the dirt, which is another thing I'll talk about a little bit later. And then I moved to another location. A guy had a wood miser. He had 2 loaders. I figured we're in great shape here. Well, it turns out one of them he's having all kinds of problems with. So he got frustrated and he sold that one. And he was also a builder, and he got really busy building. And then it turns out his loader was always off on the job site. So, you know, I had a load getting done on Tuesday, and he said, sorry, the loader's not going to be home until Saturday or Sunday. Well, I couldn't sit there idle for, you know, 5 days. So that's when I decided, you know, I really need to control my own destiny here. So I went from there. I moved into a place. It is an abandoned slab or a pallet mill. And it's just great. I mean, there's nothing fancy about it. It's got a tin roof, no insulation, you know, rough concrete and everything else, but it meets my needs. Everything is paved. So, you know, it's just a really good, convenient place for me to work. I got lots of areas to stack and air dry stuff. I've got one building that's probably, I don't know, I'd guess it to be 40 by 50. And then the other one is, other part of the building is probably another 20 by 30 or something. So I've got ample room to run my business. So since then, I've bought I've got the iDRY Standard, a Plus, a Wood Whiz slab flattener, and I've got a forklift. And now I'm starting to, you know, get into more value added stuff than just drying wood. So I can talk about that a little bit later. So I guess that's so that's about it as far as kind of getting you up to today. So
yeah,
that's a good history. So
very good. Yeah, so now you got your iDRY Standard.
Yep.
You have your iDRY Plus set up. And so did you start out just drying for customers or just drying your own wood?
Yeah.
Or a combination?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I did start out with the thought of, hey, I could dry wood for others. And when I don't have wood for myself, and I'll kind of do a mix of both, because I just didn't know. You know, I knew I could get customers that I could dry for them. And I spoke to a few different people on, you know, kind of how can I price this to make it worthwhile? And, you know, I talked to some folks that were charging 25 cents a board foot per day. And I said, wow, can't believe somebody pays that, but they actually do. That company is up in Northeast Georgia. And I just kind of worked around saying, okay, what number makes sense for me? And I just kind of settled on 20 cents a board foot per day. And I don't seem to have a lot of pushback on that. And the reason why is because when I have customers that come to me and ask me about drying wood, first thing I ask them is, you know, what is it? You know, if they say I've got a bunch of pine, I want to dry with your kiln, I tend to, you know, kind of push them away, because honestly, it doesn't make financial sense for them to spend money to dry low value species. And so, you know, I started with drying for others. And that's a really good little niche, because if you look at it, the Plus that I have, that thing on average, they say 4,000 feet. It really holds more like 3. But, you know, on average at 20 cents a board foot, I'm making $600 a day drying wood for others. And if you go, you know, $600 a day times 30 days a month, that's $18,000 a year. I mean, and if you look at the cost of a Plus, it is, you know, the Plus is what, 92,000 or something like that?
89, 84 with the sale we have going on.
84, yeah. Yeah, so let's just pick a number, say 90,000. And if you're generating $18,000 a month, you know, your cost on that kiln, depending upon if you finance it or if you're going to lease it or whatever, I got a lease on the Plus. I actually own the Standard, but I lease the Plus, and my payment on the Plus is 1,100. And then it's 1,100, I think, for 4 or 5 years, and then it's a 40K buyout at the end. But I wanted more cash available, so that's why I went down the road with leasing. And then you have to have insurance if you're going to lease a piece of equipment. So all in, my carrying cost of that Plus is somewhere in the neighborhood about 2,000. It cost me about $400 to $500 a month in electricity, another $400 for insurance for the business, and and then the lease payment. So I'm right around 2,000 for the Plus. The Standard is paid for, so I don't really have a cost other than the electricity. That one cost me $500 a month. So if you look at the kind of revenue you can generate out of these things for drying for others, it's like, it's pretty darn attractive. So, but it comes back to, you got to focus on the species that your customer can cost justify it. So if I'm going to be drying 8-quarter maple, for example, live edge maple for a customer, if I have them bring it to me somewhere around 30% moisture, 8-quarter, I can generally dry it in 2 to 2.5 weeks, depending upon if it's hard maple or soft maple. Maybe it'll go to 3 weeks, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how long it takes, as long as I'm charging them by the board foot by the day, because it's really on them. I'm not on a fixed price. I'm like, I'm going to dry it until it's dry. But still, if they're going to pay, for 3 weeks at 20 cents a day, that's going to end up costing them, somewhere around $3, I believe, a board foot to dry it. So the question is maple worth, you can buy maple for 50 cents a foot in the log, and then you're going to spend another 50 cents sawing it if you get paid somebody else to saw it. So you're all into it for $4, and so it's worth it for these people, for me to dry it for other people. It's worth it financially for me. It's worth it for them because they've got a really good product that they can use. So that's one side of the house, is drying for others. The other thing you can do is consider doing is drying for yourself. It comes with a lot more complications. You got to go out and source logs, and you got to either saw them yourself or have somebody saw them. That's actually what I do. Is I don't own a wood miser. I outsource the sawing. I've got a guy 20 miles from me or so that I can bring it up to him, and I just dump logs in his yard, and he saws everything for 45 cents a foot. And I'll drop off logs, and I'll pick up stacks of lumber that's stacked to the dimensions of the kiln, and it's stacked and stickered, so it's simple.
Hey, Ed, we got a couple questions on the drying side of things. Some
Sure.
Good ones.
Yeah.
One of them is from Scott. He says, how do you approach drying wood for others? Pricing and load sizes? Do you use structured price levels? Are you a flat rate at that 20 cents per board foot per day?
I am. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's 20 cents a board foot per day. So do I want somebody to show up with 3 slabs and dry it for them? Honestly, no. And you can really, it's a supply and demand thing. If you've got customers that want to bring full stacks to you, then that's obviously what you want to do. I've had several different customers. I've got one now. I've got 15,000 feet of oak that I'm drying for a commercial job. And, I prefer to get full stacks.
Yeah, and that was the other question. How do you deal with small orders? Do you turn them away, or do you try to fit them in when you can? Or?
Yeah, it really depends if I like them or not. I hate to say it, but
yeah,
if they do a good job of smooth talking me and they say, hey, I want to make my grandmother a table, then, that kind of thing, I'd be more inclined to say, all right, bring it over. I'll put it in when I can. But, generally speaking, I'm not looking to do onesie twosie pieces. It's really about doing stacks. And I've had good luck with people that, there are people, wood miser guys, for example, that are trying to, produce higher value stuff. And they're realizing, oh crap, I can't sell it green. I got to have it dried. And then, they realize that even eating the cost of drying it, they can still make a bunch of money on the wood. So, I guess I hope I answered your question. It's just a flat 20 cents a board foot per day.
Yeah.
If there's any one piece of information I can share with you about drying for others, the first most important thing is you have to have a really good moisture meter. And you have to have a conversation with them before they ever bring the wood to you. You got to just ask a bunch of questions. When were the logs sawed into slabs, boards, or whatever? How long ago was it sawed? And if they don't say at least 6 months, just stop right there and just say, look, I can only put it into my kiln when it reaches 30% or lower. So you're going to have to let it air dry for a period of time until it gets there, because if it comes to me wetter, it's going to take significantly more time to do it. And frankly, you're not going to be happy, because you're going to end up paying a whole lot more money to get this product dry. As a matter of fact, you may exceed the value of the product in drying green wood with me. Yeah. So if you want me to dry it, I'd be glad to do it, but you got to wait till it gets to 30% moisture. And then when you feel like they're kind of close to it, they say, hey, I've been air drying for 6 months, and they show up with a trailer with a stack of lumber on there or slabs or whatever it is. First thing you do is you pull out your moisture meter and you stab that stuff. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've had people bring stuff to me and say, oh yeah, this stuff's been down for 2 years, but I saw it 3 weeks ago. And it's like, I just can't do it. You got to bring it back. And there's been several times where I've gotten stuck with really wet wood. So you've got to be the gatekeeper for the material that's being delivered to you. And as long as you have this conversation with them before they deliver it to you, they're going to understand why you do it that way.
Matt, do you have a moisture meter like you use specifically or recommend?
Yeah, I have I actually have 2 Delmhurst and a Wagner Orion. So I've been a Delmhurst fan for a long time. I started out with the J2000, and that's been a great one.
New one, right?
What's that?
No, that's the old one.
The J2000 is the old one. It's been around forever. Yeah. They have a slide hammer with it, and the slide hammer, basically you drive these pins into the slab, and it's been wonderful. One piece of advice: if you're going to buy the Delmhurst, make sure you buy the heavy duty slide hammer, because they've got a cheaper version and then they've got a good version. The problem with the cheaper version is the coax cable that's on it the way it connects is like permanently connected to the slide hammer, and it's very vulnerable to breaking. The heavy duty one, basically you can unscrew the coaxial cable from the slide hammer and detach it from the meter. So very easy to replace a cable versus replacing the whole slide hammer. So just make sure you buy the heavy duty slide hammer if that's what you're going to do. I actually recently bought the JX2000 just came out, or I'm sorry, the JX30 is the new Delmhurst. I really like that one. That one's so much easier. On the screen, it actually lists the species, and you can choose what species you want to put on your meter. You can sync it up with your computer. We don't have Douglas fir in the Southeast here, so I don't need to have Douglas fir on my meter, but all the species we have in the Southeast, I've got on my meter now. And you're not looking at a number, you're looking at, it says black walnut or cedar or hard maple or red maple or whatever. So the JX30 is a wonderful moisture meter. There are times when I don't want to stab the wood. If I get like close to a finished product and I'm worried about maybe the middle of it might be wet or something, I'll use the Wagner Orion. The problem with the Wagner Orion is it does not work when the wood is hot. It does not give you good information. So it only works with cold wood. So, but cold wood, it is good. It's very comparable to the Delmhurst. So they're not bad, but I'm still kind of a Delmhurst bigot.
Nice.
So we had kind of someone had asked about drying. You touched on this a little bit. Drying, if it is less than 30%, other than time, what would you say would be a downside to doing that? So like if someone only has a kiln for themselves, that's probably not a huge downside, right?
Well, it is and it isn't, because I'll give you an example. I had a guy that very wealthy guy showed up with he had about 1,000 feet of 12 quarter white oak they were probably 12 inches wide, most of them. They were like big, beefy, and they were green as can be. And he was like, Ed, I don't care how much it costs. I'm building this $1 million place. I have to have these for a spiral staircase. I can't find 12-inch wide white oak anywhere. I don't care what it takes, just do it. And at the time I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I stuck it in with some other dripping wet stuff, and I figured, okay, yeah, it might take, a month or 5 weeks or so. 6 or 7 weeks later, it's finally done.
White oak is a bear anyways.
Well, the problem is not so much that I wasn't getting paid, because I got paid for the whole thing. But however, I didn't make as much money as I could, because for one thing, it was in my plus. It was 1,000 feet. My kiln holds 3,000 feet. So what I did for the first month is I put in some of my own wet stuff, and I ran it, and sure enough, my wetter, and mine wasn't dripping wet, it was just wetter. So I was able to get all my stuff done in about a month. And then I hear I have a 3/4 done load of white oak. It's only 1,000 feet. And I was like, well, maybe just one more week. And I'd run it for another week. It's like, darn it, it's not done. Well, one more week. So lo and behold, I ran 1,000 feet in this kiln for 3 weeks. Think about how much utilization I lost only having 1,000 feet running. So granted, I made $11 a board foot for drying that stuff. So I made, $11,000 to dry that white oak for that guy. And he was just tickled, because his total cost was, I think he bought the logs for, $1, and then he paid another $1 to get them sawed. He was all in for $13 for 12-quarter white oak. And, 12-quarter white oak probably goes for $18 a foot. So not only did he get it a lot cheaper, he got it as quick as he possibly could. It was still, 8 weeks away or 7 weeks away before he ended up with his finished product. Yeah. So, he kind of won, but I feel like I lost, because I didn't get full utilization out of my kiln for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that's why I'm so hesitant to dry wet wood. Every time I do that, I take on something a little bit wetter than I expected. I kick myself. It's like, darn it, don't ever do that again, And it's just one of those, if you can just stay on a schedule, say it's got to be 30%. I know if it's 8-quarter or 10-quarter or 12-quarter, I can get it done in 2 or 3 weeks. And then you just keep rolling these loads.
Helps with your timing, right, Ed? Like pretty much, if you start at 30, pretty much all your species are at that 1 week per inch of thickness.
Yep.
If you're greener, there's variables depending on species.
Absolutely.
So with your timing, you can do your 2 or 3 week cycles and just switch them over. So that's
it's just so much more reliable. So now I want to talk about something that, kind of a decision that I made going forward was I started evaluating it. And this is one of the things I share with people is like, you just always have to look at the numbers. Make decisions on this drying business based on the numbers. Look at the value of the products that you're running. You can go out online, like near me, Peach State Lumber is a specialty lumber store in Atlanta. You can go find, they have their price list online. You can go to the Woodyard in Concord, Georgia. They have their price list online. So you can get an idea, at least I can get an idea around here, what things are going for. And then I can decide, okay, that's where I need to focus. 12-quarter white oak for going for, $18 a foot. Yeah, I better start producing some of that. Granted, I won't be ready with that for a year, but it certainly puts it in the queue that that's something I want to do. Yep. So it's the same thing with walnut. Down here, there's 3 species I really chase. I chase, number 1 is walnut for sure. Number 2 is maple. Doesn't matter if it's spalted, ambrosia, hard maple, soft maple. People just like maples. I can sell the heck out of it down here. And then thirdly is white oak. And I've got a tough white oak market down here because there's so many whiskey barrels being made. Cheers. So, the prime white oak logs are going to whiskey barrels. So, but frankly, for my business, for doing tables, white oak tables, I'm not looking for primes. I'm looking for 1s and 2s, and I'm totally fine with 2s. Yeah. So I'll get big fat white oak logs that are number 2s, and I can get them cheap. So that's why it makes sense for me to focus on all these species that bring a good return. Walnut around here, if you go 8/4 or bigger, and if it's 24 inches or wider, it's going for $25 a foot. So just to share the numbers with you, I can buy walnut logs anywhere between $1 and $2 a board foot. Going to cost me 50 cents, let's just say $1 to saw it. So I'm into it for $3, and then I go dry it. I'm into it for $3 more. It's at $6, and then I flatten it to another $1. So now I'm at $7. So I've got $7 into a product that's worth $20 to $25 a foot. So, that's really good margin, $13 a board foot. And if you think about, okay, how many board feet can I put in a load in the plus? 3,000 feet times $13. That's a lot of money. So that's one of the key things I'd share with you is focus on the species that are worth a lot of money, because it just makes sense. It's just as much effort to dry a load of walnut it is to dry a load of poplar. So why not do the valuable stuff?
And so you're wholesaling to, is it Peach State or Peach?
Yeah, Peach State Lumber. So they're the largest specialty lumber store in Atlanta. And I've been fortunate enough, they had a guy, they're just a wonderful client because they have been as loyal as can be to their suppliers. There was a guy that used to supply to them that he never sold it dry, and it was never flat. He would air dry it, or I don't know if he had a solar kiln or what it was, but it was never good enough. And I showed up with kiln dried and flat stuff, and they were just blown away by it. And coincidentally, the guy was having some health issues. Their other supplier was having some health issues and couldn't produce. So I stepped in, and I've been there ever since. And I think I've been.
You just showed up one day with wood and just.
I'm sorry.
You just showed up one day with wood.
Well, I had talked to them one other time, and they said, no, we've got this supplier that he's we're loyal to him. He's been working with us for a long time. And then it was probably a year later, I happened to have a load of it was ambrosia maple, and it was highly figured ambrosia maple. And then I had a few logs of it, and I had it on my trailer, and I can't remember, I was moving somewhere. I said, something, I'm going to go over to Peach State Lumber and I'm going to show them what this stuff looks like. And they were just falling all over themselves. And so what I do with them is I actually consign it to them. And I'm okay with that because, this is kind of another little tangent I want to talk about, is you got to decide what you want to be. For me, I didn't necessarily want to be a retailer. I like doing the wholesale stuff, and my business has evolved to the point now where Peach State is a great customer. Every month they're producing, they're probably selling, $20,000 worth of slabs every month. And then, a lot of the table guys in the area found me. They found out that, hey, I'm the supplier for Peach State Lumber, or whether they know that or not, they found me, and now they've got a big appetite for, when I get some really nice slab, they're like, call me first. So, it's just a really good place to be.
Yeah.
That I know that when that stuff comes out and I get it flat and dry, that I got people that want it.
Yeah.
I have very, very little inventory in my warehouse, finished inventory. And, but the stuff I had was starting to bother me. And this is kind of another little thing. So I had a bunch of slabs that weren't that desirable. And I was like, well, what the heck am I going to do with these things? Because nobody's going to want them. Well, I just started ripping them down. And I would, if I had one with a couple good live edges on it, I'd rip it, and I'd find the other slabs that went in that log, and I'd rip a couple pieces out of there. And before you know it, I had enough components to make a live edge table. And it may be a 4-flitch table, but, it's probably, if I was to sell that wood, is probably worth $400 or $500, and I could glue it up into a 8 or a 10-foot white oak table, 4-flitch white oak tabletop. I could sell it for, $1,200-$1,500. So I'm taking a product that really didn't have a whole lot of value, and by spending the time to glue it up and flatten it, I can take some of my secondary product and create a market for it.
We just had Ty just asked, he said, do you sell your slabs through your wholesalers or your website? Is it
You know,
both?
something here's another thing too, is that because I don't have a lot of interest in becoming a retailer, there's a software out there called Trace. What is it? Lumber Tracker. It used to be Lumber Tracker.
Yep.
Trace, Trace.
Yep, that's it.
And I use them now. Actually, I have slabs up on my website, but you know, that stuff is out of date. I don't even know, you know, when was the last time I even looked at it. Because I am not trying to sell online. The reason why I used Trace was because I needed to track my inventory that I was sending over to Peach State. And then I've got a couple other customers too that I can sign with, and I needed to be able to track it. And that's what I was able to do. I tag every slab, and then I'm able to put it in the system and said, hey, that one is consigned to Peach State. So now at least I know how much inventory I have with them, and I can match it up to what they're selling every month. So Trace is a wonderful software. I think it costs like $50 a month or something. But what they provide for you is they're going to set you, if you've got a web page, they're going to say, okay, let's go in and edit your web page. Here's a snippet of code I want you to drop in to your web page, and all of a sudden you're selling online. Yes, Trace gets a little cut when you sell it. I don't know what it is. They get like 3%. And if somebody pays with a credit card, then the credit card company gets 3.5%. But you know, there's always a cost of sales, you know, so it is a great interface if you want to sell your stuff online. If I was doing that, I would definitely have my better inventory out on there. But I just don't have the time to ship slabs. And honestly, my slabs sell so quickly. I don't have to do online. My wholesalers, two of my wholesalers in the one retail place, they consume everything I produce.
And I have heard some feedback from our marketplace. Customers who go to the marketplace and get to a website that has Trace, where they can just scroll through and see the prices of the slabs, really enjoy that shopping experience.
It's a great tool. I've been looking for something. Actually, if you go out to a website, look at Berkshire Products. They're probably the largest slab producer in the country. And they're in, what is it, Sheffield, Mass? Or it's Western Mass. It's not too far from me. BerkshireProducts.com. They have a great website. Trace looks an awful lot like their website. So I was envious of Berkshire Products, saying that's what I want. And then Trace showed up, and I was like, man, there it is. And it costs $50 a month. It was a no-brainer. So check that out if you get a chance. Let me check my notes here. I want to make sure I'm covering everything I want. So we talked about dry for others, dry for yourself, decide what you want to do. The other thing is part-time versus full-time. I started part-time, and you know, when I was part-timing it that's a nice thing about this business, is you can make it as much as you want to make it. When I started out part-time, it was great. I would stick a load in and I would hit start, and I would come back in 2 weeks. I didn't even have to think about it. Matter of fact, I can monitor my kiln from my phone. I can turn it on, turn it off. I can look at the graphs, see how it's doing. So, you know, it's so easy to monitor it. And the way they've got it set up to run, it's just dumb simple. So a traditional schedule in the iDRY kiln is you set it up to say, okay, every 24 hours or every 48 hours, you want it to cycle. So what it does is when you turn it on, it creates a vacuum, sucks all the air out of the room. It brings the temperature up to 160 is the normal standard temperature. And then it just runs. If you're not running a complicated species like white oak or walnut, you just let her rip. If it's 30% or under, it's already it's below the fiber saturation point. You just let her rip, and that's all you got to do. I've gotten good enough at it that I can look at the graph and I can get an idea of when, hey, relative humidity is here. The variation of the temperature on the graph is very stable. Like if you look at the graph and it's like this, it's going up and down. The reason why it's got a big variation is because of the direction of the wind blowing in the kiln. If it blows through the stack before it hits the thermometer, well, the temperature is lower because the water in the wood is cooling the thermometer. When it switches the other way, the air is going across the thermometer before it goes through the stack, and then it shows higher. So on the graph, you get these big variations.
Every 2 hours.
It gets drier, the
Yeah.
graph starts looking like this, and it's less and less and less. And that's when I know it's close. And I generally have an idea anyway, just based on thickness and the water content going in. I have a good idea of where it is.
Have you ever had anyone, any feedback, negative feedback from the quality coming out of the kilns?
No, I really haven't. I mean, I continually impress myself every day. I would say the only negative feedback, and frankly, it's my own darn fault. I cut a load of, I think it was red oak or white oak. I don't hardly ever cut red oak anymore. And I cut a load of 5/4 red oak, and or I had somebody saw it for me. And when they stickered it about every 24 to 30 inches. And when it went into the kiln, I didn't really notice anything wrong. When it came out, it was like this. It was absolutely worthless. And so that wasn't a kiln problem. That was a stickering problem. But I basically trashed that whole stack. It turned into, firewood. It wasn't worth anything.
Couple questions. How long does 5/4 white oak take to dry at 30%?
At 30%, I would say about 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe, it depends on your season. It kind of depends upon the density of the wood, how the wood is sawed. So there's some variability in there.
Yeah.
I would say 30%, you're not going to get it done in no way you're going to get it done in 7 or 8 days.
Yeah.
It could
White
be
oak
14
takes
days.
a little while. Yeah.
It could be 14 days, but
Yeah.
you get a ballpark idea of what it's going to take. Again, it comes back to, how much is it worth? If it's your wood and it takes 3 days extra to dry it, one key thing I learned is if you're on the fence, if it's dry enough, always err on the side of, look, just run it a couple more days. It's way more important for you to make sure you're producing a good product than it is to save a couple days yield or utilization out of your kiln. I can think of several times where I've dried a load and I said, oh yeah, that's close enough. And I set it off to the side and I throw in another stack and I fire it up. And then I come back the next day to we're going to go take the stack down and we're going to go flatten it. And I get 2 layers down and I realize, crap, there's some 12s in here. And I was like, no, the other ones I stabbed were like 8s and 9s. And I thought that was good enough. And so you're far better off just err on the side of producing a good product. If that's your mindset, you'll be so much better off. It's a lot less stressful, and it's just the right thing to do.
Scooting back up here, Ed, and this was kind of going to segue into one of my questions of how do you build the clientele? How do you get these contracts?
Boy, great question. I'm glad you asked that because I haven't.
Carter in Chattanooga said that, he's got a kiln. And he does Facebook advertising and some Google advertising, and he is having a little bit of trouble getting word out and getting people to his kiln. So how do you do it?
Great question. Okay, so there's 2 sides of it, right? There's the supply side, and then there's the selling it, marketing side of it. So the supply side from if you're going to be drying for others, or if you're looking for material to buy or dry or saw, one of the first things you should do if you decide you're going to go buy a wood kiln is first things, if you're not sawing it yourself, you have to go to the Wood-Mizer directory. They've got a directory just like iDRY has a directory, and you can find all the Wood-Mizer guys in your area. Call every darn one of them. If you're thinking about doing this business, call the Wood-Mizer guys and say, hey, for the guys you're sawing, do you ever have people asking to dry wood? And invariably, I'm going to tell you, every single one of them is going to say, yes, we get that all the time. And, but they say, but we don't dry. And, we kind of tell them, just let it air dry or whatever. But get the word out to the Wood-Mizer guys that you offer kiln drying services. And it will take no time at all. I was backed up 6 months, probably. When I moved in my own place is when I really felt like I made the commitment to the business and I did all these things I should have done a year or 2 earlier. But once I, got the word out that, hey, I'm offering kiln drying services to people, I was just buried I was 6 months of drying for other people. And I was like, crap, I'm not gonna have time to dry my own stuff, and that's kind of what precipitated saying, I really need to get another kiln. I'm so far behind now. If I can keep both of these cranking full time, and that's really where I've gotten to now. They're both backed up. So, that's where you want to be. So the other side, to answer your question about customers, how do you find customers? It starts with find the table makers. I mean, if you're doing live edge slabs, the table makers are your customers. And also the big builders. I have a couple big renovation companies in the Atlanta market that, one of them's got 75 people that go and, they do, bathrooms and basements and kitchens and all this other stuff. And, they're good for, I don't know, 10, 20 slabs a year. And so those are the guys you want to find. A lot of it is just finding the people that are using the products. Go to a specialty wood store and hang out there for a little bit. Every one of the people that are in there are in the market for that kind of wood. You can go, I'm selling stuff to Woodcraft now. I got 2 Woodcraft stores in my area that they're buying little short pieces. I got stuff that I just as rather throw away, but I found it was like all these little throwaway pieces are, that's $25 or that's $35. And, before I knew it, I had a pallet load that was probably worth $1,000 to $1,500 worth of shorts. Well, I bring them over to Woodcraft and the guys are going nuts over that stuff because all they ever see is square little blocks of wood that they can either glue up or they get blocks of wood that they can turn into bowls. And all of a sudden they get something that looks different and they're going crazy about it. So go to whoever sells specialty wood in your area as a start. Go to all the furniture guys that you can find in the area. Those are probably the best avenues, I would say. I don't know how good Facebook Marketplace is for selling this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews on it.
Yeah, and I haven't done it, so I can't really say. I will say right now, I actually have I have a 14-foot walnut table that is 4 feet wide, 14 feet long. That I took some pieces that were not that great. They were 16 footers, but I ended up with a 14-foot table, and it was a 6-flitch table, but it's live edge. And I put it out on Facebook Marketplace, and of course, there's going to be the people that are saying $15,000 for a table, and it was like I talked to the high-end table guys, and they go, "Yeah, that's about right. Actually, it could be even more. It could be 20,000 or more." So, depending upon how educated your customer base is, they're going to figure out what the value is. So, that would be my recommendation. Is if you have a tough time selling, if you're starting to build a whole bunch of inventory, then maybe shift over to drying for others for a little bit. You can always switch back and forth. It's seamless to go one way or the other. And the nice thing about drying for others, it's a cash business. Every week, if you're drying 4-quarter, 5-quarter stuff, every week they're going to hand you, a couple $1,000. It's kind of nice to say, okay, well, I just did that for 10 days and that covers all my payments for all this kiln, for the.
Justin asked the question, now that we're talking about drying again, do you have any documentation written up to protect yourself if anything happens to the wood, service agreement, contract?
If I'm drying, no, I probably should, but I don't, and because, because the iDRY is so good to the wood, very rarely do I have a problem with it coming out crappy. Yeah. The only crappy wood I can think of is when I put crappy wood in. Yeah. Sometimes it comes out crappy. It certainly doesn't get better. I've got a big stack of walnut. I've been running, and I've had some problems with that because there was some bacteria or fungus in it. I was really having a tough time with a couple of logs that were in that stack. But there was a couple other logs that were at the bottom of the stack that came out beautiful, except that they were 28 inches wide and they were cracked going into the kiln. So of course they come out cracked, and I'm going to end up ripping them down and gluing them up. But it's a good question. I probably should have some kind of agreement that says, hey, you bring it to me, I'm not responsible if the stuff blows up. But,
Well, the good news is, Justin, he's been doing it for this long and it hasn't been an issue.
it hasn't been
I
an
guess
issue. It
that's-
really hasn't, you know? Yeah, it's just, and as you get more experience in this, and believe me, I am not an experienced dry person. I don't consider myself an expert at it. Fortunately, the kiln is so dumb simple. I don't have to be that smart to figure out how to do this. It really does a good job of just let her run. You know, if you get worried that you might ruin some high value stuff, you can change your settings on your kiln to say, okay, I'm going to go to low power mode. So I'm not going to heat it up really quickly. I'm going to let the suction take more of the free water out before I crank up the temperature. I'm going to shut it down in a week and a half or whatever, and I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to measure it to make sure that I got it below, 30%. Because once you get below that fiber saturation point, you don't have a whole lot of problems in the wood after that. So, when in doubt, slow it down. Maybe spread out your drain cycles, because normally it's going to drain. I typically drain mine every 24 hours, but if it's walnut, I'm getting in the habit now. I'm going 48 hours because it conditions the wood. What it does is you hold more water inside the chamber for a longer period of time, and the outside of that wood stays wetter. And while it's waiting for the inside of the wood to shed the water. So yes, it takes more time, but look at the value of the product I'm dealing with.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Any other questions? Let me see if I've. Yeah. Okay. So here's a couple other things I wanted to bring up too. So if you're thinking about buying a kiln, here's one thing you got to think of right out of the chute is material handling. That bit me in the butt right out of the chute. So you need to make sure that either you've got a bobcat or something that can lift material. You're not going to want to be hand stacking every load that comes in and out of there. What I do is I actually build the stacks. When they come off the sawmill, I tell the guys, we're going to stack this 4 feet wide, and it's going to be perfect world. For my standard is going to be 12 feet long, and it's going to be 52 inches tall. That's where I want you to build that stack. So they build that stack, and then, I go set it down and I cover it with tin, and I let it air dry for X number of months. And then I go over there and I pick up that stack again, and then I go set it in the kiln. If you don't have a lift that can lift an entire stack, which I'm telling you, some of that stuff is really heavy, what I'll do is I'll split it in half. I'll make stacks that are 2 feet tall. And then I'll build a 2-foot stack, go set it down, and then I'll put 2 runners in there, or maybe even 3 runners. And then I'll set another 2-foot stack on top of that. And that's how I load it, 2-foot stack at a time. What I do when I'm putting it into the kiln is I'll put a 2-foot stack down. I'll put one 4x4 right in the middle of the stack, and I'll put the other one on top of it. So it's like a teeter-totter. And then I go out to the end with one of the forks. I pick up the end, I pull out the 4x4. Oh, I forgot to say, I put stickers in between, every one of them, every 18 inches or so. And then I pull out that 4x4, and then I set that stack down, and now I've got that stack back together as a 4-foot stack. So that's how you can move around, big stacks if you don't have the equipment to move it. But material handling is so darn important. You've got to have that figured out ahead of time. The other thing is, if you go out and you go buy a kiln, the first thing I'd say is decide what you want to be. If you want to be a dryer for other people, then that's great. You don't have to worry about building inventory. However, I would still say you still want to build inventory to dry for yourself. Because what's going to happen is you may get a week or two where you don't have anybody that wants to use your kiln. So you got to be able to run something. And it doesn't really matter, for me, kind of like my fallback is I'll run 5-quarter walnut because I can get that stuff. There's all kinds of that. Everybody wants the big walnut, wide walnut slabs. I'll even take, 16, 18-inch walnut logs, and I'll slab them out, and I'll build stacks of that stuff. And what I'll do is I'll do 12 footers, and then after they're dry and flat, I will cut them up into 3-foot pieces and sell them as charcuterie boards. Coming into Christmas now, I'll probably sell, 3,000 at least 3,000 feet, I would guess, of 5/4 walnut. Well, by the time I flatten it, it's 4/4, but it's live edge walnut that, it flies out the door at Peach State Lumber. They just sell a ton of it.
We had a
So-
stack at IWF and you were selling them for like $25 or
Yeah,
something.
25,
and
$35 or something. And
I didn't know you were selling them at the time, but every time I looked over, the stack was smaller. I thought people were just stealing them
Yeah.
or something. And they're like, no, Ed's been selling them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
people are buying them there.
Yeah, it's a great product. So you want to be able to run stuff yourself, because it is more lucrative to dry your own stuff and sell it, providing you've got a market to sell it, and you can buy the logs at a reasonable price and mill them and all that. But if that doesn't interest you, if that isn't really what your core business is, if you just want to go dry for others, it's a great business. You'll pay off your kiln in a year or less, if you're doing a good job at it. So, my little kiln, I paid cash for it, but I'm sure I've recovered way more, probably twice as much as what I paid for it. And then the big one is really the workhorse that I can run a lot of volume through. So when I started out, I was making maybe 10 grand a month as a little side gig. And I said, yeah, that's all fun. And, but where I live, it's expensive. So, I can't get by on, $120,000 a year. Unfortunately, I've got a wife that spends a lot of money. No,
Yeah.
don't tell her I said that. But, $120,000 a year wasn't enough. So, by getting the second kiln that has twice the capacity, it's like, okay, now this is a real standalone business. I'm hoping to do, 250 or better. Well, I should do better than 250 this year, with the two kilns and stuff I'm doing. So, so it is a great business. I can't figure out another way to make money much easier. Recruiting is obviously pretty easy and it's kind of boring, but the wood business is so nice that you can, you get these stacks, you throw it in the kiln, and you push a button and you come back in a week or two, and then you pull it out of the kiln and you stick another one in. It's really like doing laundry. It's not that exciting, but I like the wood business. I've been in it since I was a kid, and it's been fun.
Do you have any employees, Ed? I've always wondered that actually.
No, I don't. I don't know. It's kind of one of those. I don't know if I'm being recorded or not. There's a retired guy that helps me out, and I help him out a little bit, and let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But he likes to run the flattener as kind of a recreation type of thing, and I let him do it when he wants to do it. So
what is the maintenance on the kilns?
Zero. Honestly, it's so what do you need for a kiln? It's a great question. So you need first thing, you need some kind of building. It doesn't, like I said, I started out in a shipping container. Doesn't have to be, because the thing generates heat, but it needs a water supply. And what the water supply is for has nothing to do with the kiln itself. What it has to do with is when that vacuum pump is running, that generates a lot of heat. So there's a little bit of water, and it's about a third to a half a gallon per minute that has to run through that vacuum pump only when the pump is running. So I think I only use about 30 gallons a day per kiln. It doesn't really use a lot of water, but it absolutely has to have water. So if your water lines are froze up, the kiln's going to sense, no water flow, boom, it just shuts itself down. It's not going to blow up on you. I mean, it's all automated. And the nice thing is when the kiln shuts down, if you're online, it sends me a message that says, hey, Ed, your kiln's down. And, then I can, go deal with it and figure out what the problem is. But so you need a water supply. And then you also need two 2050 amp, which is basically like a hot tub. It's not 3-phase or anything like that. It's not that complicated to get it's like a dryer outlet to run it. So not really complicated, but you want the electricity and the water are the only two things you need. The other thing I think is really important, and I learned this from the first time when I had it stuffed inside a shipping container, we were loading it off the dirt, and we had a Bobcat, which is great. But the problem is, hey, it's rainy, wet, things get rutted or whatever. Next thing you know, you can't set that load down on there flat because it's rutted or whatever. So I think it's really important if you're going to set up a kiln, pour a pad, so that when you go up there with your Bobcat, you're sitting on level ground and you've got this track back here. So, well, here I can do that you can go into this track and you always know your level. So you set it on top of the track and then you roll a trolley into the kiln. So that's why pouring a pad just makes it so much easier. So if you have the ability to do that, fortunately, both my kilns are inside a building. It's already concrete and it's already flat. So, I'm kind of set.
Do you heat your buildings, Ed? I got a guy who asked.
No, there's no heating in this building. It was built in the 60s. It's tin. It's an old tin building. We're in Georgia, so it does get cold. It gets down to 10, 20 degrees, sometimes over the winter. But what I do is I have that heat tape, it's basically an electrical cord you wrap around the water line. You just plug it in and and I have that from the ground all the way up to the kiln. So I just keep that plugged in during the winter and I don't have to worry about water freezing.
Nice.
Hey, Ed, we had Milan Miller raise his hand. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get him. I'm going to allow him to talk here and ask you his question.
Okay, sure.
All right. Let us know if you are able to talk. You can go ahead and ask your question, Milan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
So yeah, I was just curious, is the flattener pretty much the same process as with your planer and sander?
Yeah, so I have a Wood Whiz. If you search on Wood Whiz, W-I-Z-Z, it is a great tool. It's actually sold by Baker Products. Wood Whiz is out of Australia. Wood Miser has one. They call it the Slab Miser. And I think Wood Miser basically copied Wood Whiz. I like the functionality of Wood Whiz better than the Slab Miser. I've got a friend that has a Slab Miser and I looked at how it runs and I just don't like it. I mean, they're on metal. It's on a metal deck. So I don't know how you attach the slabs down to that. I've been a big fan of, hey, go to the people that started that were like thought leaders with a tool. And that's what this Wood Whiz guy was in Australia. And I couldn't be happier with that thing. That thing has paid for itself time and time again. When I was trying to figure out what to do, I talked to an Amish guy up in, I think he was in Ohio somewhere. And he bought one, I don't know, 2 or 3 years before me. And he was charging $75 an hour. And he says, I'm going every day, all day long, making $75 an hour. And he paid $20,000 for this tool. And I think they're up to like 22,000, maybe 23 now. They're not too crazy. But, at $75 an hour, that thing pays for itself in no time. And for me, the reason why I bought it is because I wanted to produce the best product in the area. And that meant it had to be kiln dried properly and it had to be flat. So the Wood Whiz is just wonderful for that. You can joint with the thing. I do all my glue ups on that table. There's just a lot of good functionality of having that bed there. The consumables on it. Oh, you can actually sand with it as well. So after I flatten a slab, I'll run the sander. It's got an 8-inch sander head over it. I can do a whole slab in 5 minutes. And then what I'll typically do is I'll put 2 slabs. 2 24-inch slabs next to each other. I can do 5 feet wide on that thing and 12 feet long. So I'll flatten 2 slabs at the same time. Once I get them flat, then I put the sander head on. I'll sand both slabs. I'll take 10 minutes and sand them. And then I flip them over, do the other side, and off we go. I got flat and sanded.
And I got another question here. Kind of, what is your average monthly cost to run these kilns?
Okay, yeah, great question. So I'll tell you all my numbers. So the lease payment on my Plus is $1,100 a month. I didn't have insurance before I bought the Plus. I was just kind of winging it. It's risky to do that. So I went to Pennsylvania Lumberman's. That's who carries my insurance. I pay about $400 a month for insurance. So it's $1,100 for the kiln, $400 a month for the insurance, which insures my whole business. It's not just that kiln. It's both kilns, my inventory, all my equipment that's in there. And then $400 to $500 a month in electricity. Actually, I've got an agreement with my landlord because that was a pallet mill. They've got 3-phase there, and it covers several different rental things. I think I'm basically paying the electricity for all the renters that have other parts of that building, but they don't really use electricity. They're, you know, one's a brick guy and, you know, he doesn't really use it. Another guy is a mechanic. So, you know, as part of my lease, so I rent my building for the 2 building areas that I have. Including electricity, I pay $2,500 a month. So I pay $2,500 for electricity and rent. I pay another 1,500 for the lease payment and the insurance. So I think that, what's that number? That's $4,000 there. And then, you know, there's probably another $1,000 in miscellaneous or whatever. I just kind of generally say my monthly nut is about $5,000.
Cool.
Okay. And how are you, when you're going to get these logs that are further away, how are you bringing them back to the kiln?
Okay, great question. So, so for one thing, the nice thing about this business is raw material is very cheap. And, you know, if you kind of know what you're doing, because I used to work in the forest products industry, I kind of knew a little bit about it. But if you're going to go find logs, and I hope I'm not talking to anybody in the Atlanta market, because I don't want you to go stealing all my logs, but sources of logs, tree guys are okay. The problem is tree guys are going to try to huck off whatever junk they have that day. And you can't really plan for what you're going to get from them. What happens is in most areas that are bigger areas, there are what they call wood yards. And those are like concentration points. The wood yard guys, they go out and they collect logs from tree guys, and they basically sort them into, you know, it's hardwood pulp or hardwood saw log or pine pulp or pine saw log. And they, depending upon what they sort, they'll send it to different mills. Well, what I like to do is I like to go to those wood yards, and I actually want to go buy the crap that they can't send to the mills, because whether it's got blue stain in it from metal, I'll gladly cut a walnut log that's got metal in it, because, you know, a wood miser saw blade costs, you know, $23. And I've got a, you know, $800 slab. I don't care if I spend $23 to get that $800 slab. So I'll blow through 2 or 3 blades if I have to get through a big log. So so woodyard guys are a great source. And then lastly, what happens is eventually the word gets out that you're the guy that produces walnut, and somebody calls up and says, hey, I've got 4 walnut trees in my yard. I currently have 4 different people right now are waiting for me to go cut the walnut logs out of their yard. So, you know, you know, that just kind of grows organically. What happens if you tell the tree guys that, hey, I'm looking to buy walnut? Eventually they're going to call you if you talk to enough of them. And particularly if you tell them, hey, I'll pay you like $1 a foot, or, you know, if it's over 24 inches diameter, I'll pay you $2 a foot. And then they say, yeah, but I've got this 36-inch veneer, perfect, straight walnut log that somebody told me it's worth 6 or 7. It probably is, but that's a veneer log. I don't do tables with veneer logs. I'm looking for number 1s and number 2s, because people want figure. They don't want just straight boring grain. And frankly, you know, a veneer log should go to a veneer mill.
Nice.
Good advice.
Actually, an interesting question here asking, have you ever considered a metal detector?
Oh yeah, I've got one.
And,
and I do use it. I've actually I've run into a horseshoe in a log before. That makes quite a thump to the middle when you hit a horseshoe. Breaks the blade immediately. And it was funny. I tried to save it as a trophy piece. I think somebody walked off with it. But yeah, we hit nails all the time. And you know, you can do metal detector, or you can just say, you know, the problem is yard trees. Yeah, they're really susceptible to having metal in them. Somebody hung a birdhouse or a thermometer or a clothesline or whatever. But if you kind of have an idea where your logs came from, typically any metal you're going to find is going to be in the first 12 feet. So you go into second log or whatever, you typically don't find a lot of metal. But
Okay.
yeah, no, they work. You know, a lot of times I'll see a log. If I look at the end of the log and I see blue stain on the end, I know it's got metal. It's just a matter of where and then how I'm going to deal with it. Usually I start off by trying to saw around it. I'll saw the other side of the log first and, you know, try to work my way into it.
Well, all right, guys. Ed, this was awesome.
Yeah, let me see if there's any other things I want to yeah, winterizing,
While
moisture.
he's doing that,
meter.
don't forget, guys, too, deposits, $500 a month, or $500 for deposits this month until Black
Yeah.
Friday, right, Paul?
The $500 deposit, $5,000 off a plus, 2,500 off a standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if, you know, if any of you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to call me. If you want to write my number down real quick, it's 770-891-5108. And I like the gab. So if you want to.
What was the last four? 5108?
Yeah, 770-891-5108. And let me think, two things. Yeah, well, I think it's important to, you know, just try to figure out what you want to be. What I see, some people get into this and they say, well, I want to grow the trees, saw the trees, dry the trees, and make the furniture. And, you know, that's a really tough road to do everything. I think you're better off just pick the niche that you want to play in. I started out saying, all I ever want to do is just dry wood. I don't want to saw it. I don't want to buy a sawmill. I'm just going to buy logs. I'll get somebody to saw them. I'll dry them, and then I'll sell them. And the only reason I've gone to a little bit more value add is because I had some inventory of less desirable wood that I just didn't want to go burn. I figured I could rip it down and sell some unfinished tabletops. So, but decide what you want to be. You can't be everything. So figure out what you want to do and then just be really good at that. You know, if you want to be really good at drying wood, study drying wood. You know, there's a lot of science. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there about physiologically what happens to the wood when it's being dried. And, you know, why do you slow it down? And, you know, I just got a great education about fungus and walnut. I got punished by a couple of logs that had a lot of fungus in it and they just got stuck. And it took a lot longer than it should to dry that stuff. But
Did you speak with the owner directly about that? I just want
about where the logs came from?
No, you spoke with Jim a little bit about the
Oh, Jim Parker. Yeah. I talked to him about the wood and, you know, being stuck. And actually, who is the guy up in Canada? I'm drawing a blank right now. He's on social media a lot.
Oh my God, you had to ask. I know his name. It's Titus.
Steve Titus. He's a really bright guy. I really enjoy talking to him. You know, his recommendation on that wood that was stuck was just pull it out and let it set for a while. And unfortunately, I couldn't take that advice. I need to turn that into money. I can't just let it set. So I ended up surfacing. I had some 3-inch thick walnut that were 30-inch wide that got stuck at about, most of it was, you know, 7-8%. But then I had these pockets or streaks that were like 20. And it was just so what I decided to do was to surface them. And I put them in about 5 days ago, and I'm hoping that within another few days, they're going to be done. But I'm going to let her rip. I got, you know, there's probably $20,000 worth of slabs in that kiln running, and I got to let her rip, and it'll eventually get there.
One last thing before we close this out: customer support at iDRY. How do you feel?
Oh
about
man,
it?
Brian is the support guy, and so in the 3 years of drying, I've had 1 fan motor, I've had 3 controllers, 2 on the standard and 1 on the plus, I believe, and a door seal that I haven't repaired yet. But I actually was able to make it work. I had a tough time with it sealing up when it was cold weather. I ended up putting Vaseline on the seal and it just sealed right up. And what I try to do is I don't let the kilns cool down. I keep it, you know, when I shut it down to unload it, I immediately unload it and I immediately reload it. And I try to get the door shut. I can flip a load in about 30 minutes. So, you know, as long as the kiln doesn't cool off and that rubber gasket get too cold, it seals right up again. So, but every time I've had an issue, I call Brian. He can actually go online and look at your kiln and tell you what he thinks is wrong, and most times he's right. And if it's a part problem, they overnight you a part. And like all my stuff has been under warranty. I haven't paid for any parts yet. So you know, it's been great. So if you have questions about how to, Brian at iDRY is the guy. He's really, really smart, and he knows the kiln inside and out, all kinds of problems.
And I'm pretty sure you're gonna talk to one of the same, what, Paul, 4 people?
Yeah,
You're gonna, that's
you're
it.
gonna talk to either myself, Brian, maybe Jim, but we are available all the time.
Yeah, Brian probably takes 95% of the support calls,
Yep.
I would say.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you call about a problem, just ask for Brian.
Yep.
And if Brian's not around, they might punt it back to Paul, but
I'll tell you to turn it off and turn it on again, and then call Brian when he's back. So.
so if any of you guys have any questions about, you know, getting the business started and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of other things to think about. Like I've had people that said, well, I live in a subdivision and I have an HOA. Can I put a kiln in my garage? And it's like, well, you better ask your HOA.
Yeah.
You know, and you got to make sure that wherever you're going to put it, that you're zoned properly. So last thing, well, I can't say last thing because I've actually moved twice, but it's really not that big a deal to move. If you have to move a kiln, it's easy. You call a tow truck, they come out and they hook up the winch to it and they pull it on the tow truck and they go dump it somewhere else. So it's not like when they deliver it. When they deliver it off the tractor trailer, you have to get a crane to do that. But if you want to move it after that, it's basically a tow truck haul.
Yep. Cool.
All right.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining.
All right. I think
We'll
I covered
be
everything.
sending out a replay to everyone who's here. I'm sure we'll share it on social too. And like Ed said, shoot them questions, shoot Paul questions. You should get another email with my email in it. So feel free to shoot me a question too.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope you it was educational. You had fun.
Cheers.
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 Have a great night, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.